My stepmom smiled as she handed me a trash bag and said, "Your father's gone, and so is your right to live here." My lawyer begged me to take her to court. Everyone told me to fight. Instead, I grabbed my coat, took the bag, and walked out the front door without saying a single word. Everyone thought I was too broken to care, that I was just letting her strip away everything my father built. But what my stepmom didn't realize as she changed the locks behind me was that I wasn't leaving empty-handed. She thought she was taking the crown jewel of my father's estate, completely blind to the trap he had laid out for her months before he died. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Clara. I'm 28 years old, and up until 3 weeks ago, I thought family meant standing together when everything falls apart. But the funeral flowers were barely wilted when my stepmom, Evelyn, made it very clear where I stood. I was sitting in my father's quiet study, surrounded by the faint scent of his favorite cedar pipe tobacco and decades of memories. Dad had built his local real estate business from nothing, pouring his life into securing a future for us. But just 14 days after his heart finally gave out, Evelyn walked in, holding a thick stack of legal papers. She didn't look like a grieving widow. She looked like a woman who had been patiently waiting for her moment. Without a trace of warmth in her eyes, she set the documents on the mahogany desk and crossed her arms. "Your father's affairs are settled, Clara," she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "The house, the business, the accounts, it's all been left to me under the updated will. You have 24 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave." Just like that, my whole world shattered a second time. Evelyn's sudden coldness shouldn't have surprised me, but seeing the mask slip off so completely still took my breath away. For 10 years, she'd played the role of the supportive wife, offering warm smiles whenever Dad was in the room. But behind closed doors, she always treated me like an unwelcome intruder in my own home. Now that Dad was gone, she didn't bother hiding her true colors for even a second. Over the next few hours, I watched in utter disbelief as she marched through the house like an auctioneer. She placed bright red sticky notes on Dad's antique clock, his favorite paintings, and even the keys to his vintage convertible. She wasn't just taking ownership of his estate, she was systematically erasing every trace of his life, and mine. Desperate for answers, I called our family attorney, Mr. Vance. His voice was heavy over the phone. "Clara, that updated will was signed just 3 months ago," he warned me gently. "Contesting it will cost you tens of thousands in legal fees and could drag on in court for years. Unless you have serious leverage, walking away might be your only sane option." That night, I packed my life into 2 small suitcases while Evelyn stood in the hallway, watching my every move like a hawk to make sure I didn't take anything unauthorized. My chest ached with every folded sweater, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Just before zipping up my bag, I walked over to the framed childhood photo of Dad and me sitting on my nightstand. Evelyn scoffed as I picked it up, assuming it was just sentimental garbage. But as I slid the picture out of the wooden frame, my fingers brushed against a small brass key taped hidden behind the backing paper. Suddenly, Dad's voice echoed in my mind from a conversation we'd had months ago. "Clara, if there ever comes a day when this house no longer feels like home, check behind our picture." I slipped the key into my pocket, grabbed my bags, and walked out into the pouring rain without saying another word. Evelyn smiled as she slammed the door behind me. The next morning, I stood inside the cold, quiet vault of First National Bank downtown. The small brass key fit perfectly into box 412, turning with a sharp, heavy click. As I slid the metal box onto the table, my hands trembled. Inside were bank statements, corporate titles, and an envelope with my name written in Dad's steady handwriting. I opened the letter first. "Clara, if you're reading this, Evelyn has shown who she really is. Don't grieve for what she thinks she took." As I read through the documents, the sheer genius of Dad's plan unfolded. Evelyn had spent months pushing Dad to sign over the residential house and his original branch office, assuming they held all his wealth. But Dad knew what she was doing. 6 months before he died, he mortgaged the mansion to its limit and quietly transferred every profitable commercial property into a private trust established solely in my name. Evelyn hadn't won a fortune. She had fought tooth and nail to inherit over $1.5 million in hidden debt, while the true crown jewel of Dad's estate belonged entirely to me. Over the next 3 weeks, I stayed at a small rented apartment near the harbor, keeping my head down while Evelyn savored her apparent triumph. She didn't waste a single moment showing off. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard she was throwing lavish dinner parties at the mansion, boasting to everyone in town about taking over Dad's real estate empire and hiring contractors to remodel the house. I played the role of the defeated, heartbroken stepdaughter to absolute perfection. When her attorney sent over the final estate settlement documents, I signed my waivers without raising a single objection. I wanted her completely confident, totally convinced that she had pushed me out into the cold with nothing. Every document she signed solidified her sole ownership of the residential property, and every dollar of debt tied to it. I sat by my window, watching the rain hit the glass, knowing the clock was ticking down. Have you ever had to act weak just to let someone trap themselves in their own greed? Tell me in the comments, because watching Evelyn build her castle on sand took every ounce of patience I had. Exactly 30 days after the probate papers were finalized, the trap snapped shut. The bank's grace period expired, and the first balloon payment on the mansion's heavy mortgage came due, alongside years of accumulated back taxes Dad had left unpaid on that specific title. Evelyn's frantic phone calls started at dawn. When I didn't answer, she demanded an emergency meeting at Mr. Vance's office. When I walked into the conference room, the arrogant woman who had kicked me out was completely gone. Sitting across from her lawyer, Evelyn looked pale, disheveled, and terrified, holding a stack of demand letters totaling nearly $2 million. Clara, thank God, she gasped, her voice trembling. There's been a mistake with the business accounts. The bank says the residential accounts are empty, and these debts are mine. You need to release funds from your father's commercial properties to cover this immediately. I calmly pulled the trust documents from my bag and set them on the table. I'm afraid I can't do that, Evelyn, I said softly. Dad transferred the commercial empire into my private trust months ago. You fought for the house, and now it's all yours, along with every single penny of debt. Evelyn stared at the trust documents in utter silence as the reality of her greed crashed down around her. Unable to afford the massive mortgage or back taxes, she was forced to sell off the luxury cars, auction her designer wardrobe, and downsize to a tiny one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town just to avoid complete bankruptcy. As for me, I stepped into my father's shoes as the head of his real estate trust. Standing in his real office, the one she never knew existed, I felt closer to him than ever, knowing he had protected me even from beyond the grave. If this story taught you that patience and truth always win in the end, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Evelyn got what she deserved, or should I have shown her mercy? Thank you for watching until the end.